21. Biggest scumbags in old country music history. They wore rhinestones, sang about heartbreak, and stood tall as country music legends. But behind the microphones and stage lights hid some of the darkest secrets in music history. From violent crimes to backstabbing betrayals, these aren't just country stars, they're the biggest scumbags the genre ever saw. This isn't the country music story you grew up with. It's the one they hoped you'd never find out. Ready to hear the truth they tried to bury? Hit that like button, subscribe, and get ready Uncovered. Tinseltown Uncovered is pulling no punches on this one. Let's dive in. Spade Cooley. At the height of his fame, Spade Cooley was more than just a musician. He was a showbiz institution. Born Donald Clyde Cooley in Oklahoma in 1910, he rose to power in the 1940s as the charismatic leader of a Western swing orchestra that packed ballrooms and earned him his own television show in Los Angeles. Known for hits like Shame on You and his on-stage bravado, Cooley was hailed as a trailblazer in merging country with big band stylings. But behind the bright lights, a far darker man was emerging. That darkness exploded into full view on April 3, 1961. After suspecting his second wife, Ella Mae Evans, of infidelity, Cooley flew into a jealous rage. Inside their home, he inflicted a savage beating upon her, one so severe it crushed her skull and ribs. To ensure she was dead, he burned her with a cigarette. The most chilling detail: their 14-year-old daughter Melody witnessed the entire ordeal and would later testify against her father in a case that gripped the nation. Convicted of first-degree murder, Cooley was sentenced to life imprisonment. Yet justice proved fleeting. After just 8 years behind bars, he was granted a temporary furlough to perform at a benefit concert in November 1969. Moments after taking the stage to thunderous applause, he collapsed from a heart attack and died backstage, age 58. Cooley's brutal crime erased decades of musical success. Though once a household name, his records vanished from rotation, and his legacy was rightfully buried beneath the weight of his violence. No redemption arc, no misunderstood genius, just a man who used fame as a shield for his cruelty. In the annals of country music, few falls from grace are as absolute or as deserved as Spade Cooley's. Johnny Paycheck. Johnny Paycheck may have sung "Take This Job" and "Shove It," but by the end of his life, it was society saying the same to him. Born Donald Eugene Lytle in Greenfield, Ohio in 1938, Paycheck had real talent. He played bass for George Jones, wrote for Tammy Wynette, and delivered several country hits on his own. But his outlaw persona wasn't just a stage act. It reflected a deeply troubled man with a long rap sheet and even darker allegations. His first major legal trouble came in the 1950s, when he was court-martialed for assaulting a naval officer and spent 2 years in military prison. In 1981, Paycheck was arrested in Wyoming on accusations involving a 12-year-old girl. Though the case didn't go to trial and was reduced to a misdemeanor with a $1,000 fine, a $3 million civil suit followed, eventually dropped, but never forgotten. Then came the 1985 incident that sealed his downfall. During a dispute in a bar in Hillsboro, Ohio, Paycheck shot a man in the head with a .22 caliber pistol. Miraculously, the bullet only grazed the victim, but Paycheck was sentenced to 7 years in prison. After multiple appeals failed, he began his sentence in 1989, ultimately serving just under 2 years before receiving a pardon from Ohio Governor Richard Celeste. Despite occasional career comebacks, Paycheck never shook the cloud that followed him. For many, his lawless lyrics lost their charm when mirrored by real-world violence and abuse. He died in 2003 at age 64, remembered more for what he did with a gun than a guitar. Among country's rogues, Johnny Paycheck didn't just flirt with the line, he stomped right over it and paid the price. George Jones. George Jones is often hailed as one of the greatest country vocalists of all time. But behind that smooth, sorrowful voice was a man trapped in a whirlwind of addiction, destruction, and cruelty. Born in 1931 in Saratoga, Texas, Jones climbed to fame in the late 1950s with chart toppers like White Lightning and He Stopped Loving Her Today. But even as his music captured hearts, his personal life left scars, especially on the people closest to him. Nicknamed No-Show Jones for his chronic concert absences, George was notorious for his inability to stay sober. He regularly canceled shows, sometimes disappearing for days on drug and alcohol binges. His addictions made headlines, but it was his private behavior that drew the most condemnation. His marriage to fellow star Tammy Wynette, while iconic in the public eye, was filled with domestic violence, emotional abuse, and explosive fights. Wynette later detailed horrifying episodes, one where he chased her with a loaded rifle. Jones's recklessness extended to his family and finances. He missed child support payments, was often behind on bills, and totaled multiple cars while driving drunk. Producers and promoters grew weary of his unpredictability, even as fans kept hoping for redemption. Despite a brief resurgence in the 1990s, his reputation never fully recovered. He may have received a Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 2012, but for many the award came too late to rewrite the damage. He died in 2013 at age 81. George Jones's story is a haunting reminder that talent does not excuse torment. His golden voice lives on, but so does the legacy of the pain he caused, making him one of country music's most tragic and troubling figures. David Allan Coe. David Allan Coe is perhaps the most divisive figure in country music history, and that's saying a lot. Born in Akron, Ohio in 1939, Coe served time in prison as a young man before reinventing himself as a gritty outlaw singer-songwriter. At first, he earned respect for raw, emotional songs like "You Never Even Called Me by My Name." But underneath his musical bravado was a festering core of bigotry and rage that would eventually tarnish his legacy beyond repair. In the early 1980s, Coe released two underground albums, Underground Album and Nothing Sacred, on independent labels. These records weren't just edgy, they were appallingly racist, misogynistic, and homophobic. One track mocked interracial relationships with a line about vomiting. Another described black people in language so revolting it can't be repeated. These weren't metaphorical protest songs, they were hate speech set to music. Coe defended these albums as satire, but few were convinced. The damage was done. Though the albums weren't sold in mainstream stores, they circulated widely among collectors and became a grotesque undercurrent to his public career. Outside the studio, Coe lived up to his outlaw image, but not in any admirable way. Covered in tattoos often associated with biker gangs and known for brawling with critics and industry peers, Coe alienated even those who initially admired his authenticity. His shows became unpredictable, and many venues stopped booking him altogether. While some die-hard fans still cling to his early catalog, Coe's name is often left out of country music retrospectives for good reason. In an industry that has often overlooked or excused bad behavior, Coe's brand of hostility was simply too extreme. Whatever talent he had was ultimately drowned out by the venom he spread, making him a cautionary tale of how far outlaw can fall. Conway Twitty. Conway Twitty was known for his silky voice chart-topping duets with Loretta Lynn and a romantic persona that captivated millions. But beneath the polished exterior was a shrewd businessman whose decisions left a trail of broken trust and bitter resentment. Born Harold Lloyd Jenkins in 1933, Twitty transitioned from rockabilly to country in the late 1960s, quickly becoming one of the most prolific hitmakers of all time with a staggering 40 #1 country singles. Yet success in the charts didn't translate to respect behind the curtain. Industry insiders and collaborators frequently described Twitty as manipulative, secretive, and driven by self-interest. One of his most controversial ventures was Twitty City, a Nashville-based tourist attraction meant to celebrate his career. Though lavish, it was riddled with financial mismanagement costing investors millions. Lawsuits followed alleging that funds were misappropriated or poorly tracked. Even in performance, Twitty was known to undercut others. During shared tours with fellow stars like George Jones, Conway allegedly arranged the lineup to ensure he always closed the show, stealing the spotlight regardless of billing. Backstage reports circulated of him underpaying band members and demanding near-total loyalty with little tolerance for dissent. Women in the industry also recalled an unsettling power imbalance when working with Twitty. Though no public allegations were ever officially filed, whispers of coercive advances and uncomfortable encounters were common in Nashville circles, stories that never made headlines but refused to die. Conway Twitty passed away suddenly in 1993 at age 59 after collapsing on tour. Though his musical achievements are undeniable, his reputation as a ruthless operator and opportunist remains etched in the memories of those who knew him best. For all the love songs he sang, Twitty's behind-the-scenes conduct makes him a deeply controversial figure in country music lore. Morgan Wallen. Morgan Wallen was supposed to be country music's next megastar. With his signature mullet, gritty vocals, and bro country charm, he appealed to a new generation of fans hungry for Southern anthems. Born in 1993 in Sneedville, Tennessee, Wallen broke through on The Voice before scoring platinum hits like Whiskey Glasses and 7 Summers. But while his music soared, his behavior unraveled quickly and publicly. The biggest scandal hit in February 2021 when TMZ released security footage showing Wallen drunkenly shouting the N-word to friends outside his Nashville home. The fallout was immediate. Major radio stations dropped his music, the Academy of Country Music deemed him ineligible for awards, and his record label suspended him. Wallen apologized, claiming he was ashamed and committed to learning from the incident. But critics, and even some fans, weren't buying it. This wasn't Wallen's first brush with controversy. In 2020, just before a planned Saturday Night Live performance videos surfaced of him partying maskless and kissing strangers at a college bar, violating COVID-19 protocols. SNL pulled him from the lineup only to invite him back weeks later. Despite everything, Wallen's commercial success exploded. His album, Dangerous, the double album, dominated the Billboard 200 for 10 consecutive weeks, making him the best-selling artist in the U.S. that year. The controversy only seemed to fuel his popularity. In 2023, Wallen stirred headlines again by reportedly walking off the SNL stage early during a farewell send-off. Some interpreted it as diva behavior. Others saw it as another sign of defiance. Wallen's story is still being written, but the damage to his reputation is undeniable. For a man once branded the future of country, he's become a flashpoint for debate over racism, accountability, and whether talent should ever excuse toxic conduct. Jimmy Allen. Jimmy Allen was once celebrated as country music's rising beacon of diversity. As a black artist in a genre that often lacked racial representation, Allen broke barriers with his debut album, Mercury Lane, landed high-profile collaborations, and even won the 2021 CMA Award for New Artist of the Year. But behind the scenes, a much darker story was unfolding, one that would dismantle his promising career almost overnight. In May 2023, Allen was sued by a former female manager who accused him of repeated sexual abuse, including assault during business trips and coercive behavior that spanned 2 years. The lawsuit painted a grim picture of manipulation and unchecked power. Just weeks later, a second woman came forward with additional claims of sexual misconduct, adding weight to the accusations. Allen denied the allegations, stating that the encounters were consensual. But the damage was immediate. His management dropped him, label deals evaporated, and tour dates were canceled. Country music outlets, once eager to praise him as a symbol of progress, went silent. As the lawsuits unfolded, personal drama mounted. In the same year, Allen's wife filed for divorce while pregnant with their third child. Soon after, Allen revealed that he had quietly fathered twins with another woman during the marriage. What once looked like a picture-perfect family life was now a tabloid storm of betrayal and scandal. The fall was swift and thorough. Allen, once seen as the genre's crossover success story, now became a cautionary tale about unchecked ego and abuse of power. While the legal battles are ongoing, the court of public opinion has already rendered its verdict. For a man who once sang about freedom, Jimmy Allen now finds himself shackled not by critics, but by consequences of his own making. Jerry Lee Lewis. Jerry Lee Lewis may have been a rock and roll pioneer, but his mark on country music is undeniable, with hits like Another Place, Another Time and What's Made Milwaukee famous, topping charts throughout the late 60s and 70s. But for all the praise he earned in music, Lewis's personal life remains one of the most unsettling chapters in entertainment history. In 1957, at the height of his early fame, Lewis traveled to England for a tour that would end in catastrophe. British reporters discovered he had secretly married his 13-year-old cousin, Myra Gale Brown, who was also his first cousin once removed. Even worse, Lewis had lied to the press, claiming she was 15. The scandal exploded, and within 3 performances, the entire tour was canceled. When he returned to the US, his career was effectively blacklisted for years. But that wasn't the only disturbing chapter in his romantic life. Lewis was married 7 times, and 2 of his wives died under questionable circumstances. His 4th wife drowned in a pool under mysterious conditions. His 5th died just months after they wed, reportedly from a methadone overdose. No charges were filed, but the pattern raised eyebrows that never fully lowered. Known for his fiery temper, Lewis also had several violent outbursts, once firing a gun in his own home during a drunken rant. He was arrested outside Elvis Presley's Graceland estate, armed and allegedly intending to confront the king. Though inducted into multiple halls of fame, Jerry Lee Lewis's legacy remains permanently stained. His musical contributions are undeniable, but the choices he made off stage were indefensible. For many, the legend is overshadowed by the predatory behavior and chaos he left in his wake, making him one of the most controversial figures to ever cross from rock to country. Shania Twain. Shania Twain isn't a criminal or an abuser like others on this list, but her tangled personal life still caused one of the most shocking and talked about betrayals in modern country history. Known as the Queen of Country Pop, Twain rose to superstardom in the 1990s with chart-topping albums like Come On Over and Up. Her image was pristine, empowering, and family-focused until it all unraveled in public. In 2008, Twain announced her separation from her longtime husband and producer, Robert Mutt Lange. The man who had helped craft her biggest hits had behind the scenes been having an affair with Shania's close friend and personal assistant, Marie Ann Thibault. The revelation blindsided Twain and the music world alike. The 2 women had been inseparable. The betrayal cut far deeper than a professional fallout. But what came next made headlines even more bizarre. In an unexpected twist, Twain later fell in love with and eventually married Marie Ann's ex-husband, Frédéric Thibault, in 2011. The situation quickly earned the moniker the Great Husband Swap and became tabloid gold. While no laws were broken, fans were divided. Some viewed it as poetic justice. Others saw it as a messy entanglement unbecoming of her previously wholesome image. The affair and remarriage became a media circus, distracting from her music and casting a long shadow over her once perfect brand. Shania Twain deserves respect for surviving heartbreak and reinventing herself, but this twist in her personal life still stands as one of country music's strangest scandals. It wasn't criminal, but it was sensational raw, and exposed the kind of behind-the-scenes drama that rarely sees daylight in the carefully managed world of stardom. Lefty Frizzell. Lefty Frizzell was a country music pioneer whose smooth, drawn-out vocal phrasing would influence legends like George Jones, Merle Haggard, and Willie Nelson. Born William Orville Frizzell in 1928, he skyrocketed to fame in 1950 with the hit If You've Got the Money, I've Got the Time. With movie star looks and an unmatched vocal style, he seemed destined for iconic status. But his legacy carries a dark, often overlooked stain. In July 1947, when Frizzell was just 19 years old and newly married, he was arrested and charged with statutory rape in Roswell, New Mexico. The victim was a young girl, and while records from the era remain limited, The charge was serious enough to land him in jail for 6 months. During his incarceration, he wrote deeply personal letters to his wife Alice, including the now famous lyrics to "I Love You a Thousand Ways," a song that would later become a hit. Frizzell never publicly addressed the crime. His career continued to flourish throughout the 1950s with multiple chart toppers and a fan base that remained unaware or willfully forgetful of his early conviction. Industry insiders, however, knew the story and often cited his legal troubles as one reason why he never reached the heights of contemporaries like Hank Williams. Later in life, Frizzell battled alcoholism and spiraled into obscurity. He died in 1975 at the age of 47 from a massive stroke, his body ravaged by years of hard living. While his musical influence is undeniable, the criminal behavior at the start of his career casts a shadow that can't be ignored. In a genre built on heartache and truth, Frizzell's legacy is one of beauty marred by secrecy, making him a complicated and for some irredeemable figure in country music history. Ernest Tubb. Ernest Tubb is often remembered as a founding father of honky-tonk, credited with bringing electric guitar into country music and paving the way for modern Nashville sound. His 1941 hit "Walking the Floor Over You" helped redefine the genre, and he remained a Grand Ole Opry mainstay for decades. But behind the signature drawl and twang was a man whose rage nearly turned deadly. In 1957, Tubb shocked the Nashville community when he arrived at the National Life Building in the early hours of the morning, carrying a loaded .357 Magnum. His apparent target, music executive Jim Denny, with whom he had a bitter falling out. But in a drunken haze, Tubb misidentified a radio news director named Bill Williams as his target and opened fire. Miraculously, he missed. Twice. Police quickly apprehended him. He was charged with public drunkenness rather than attempted murder, a decision many criticized as preferential treatment due to his celebrity status. Tubb's camp brushed it off as a misunderstanding, but the industry took notice. Some say it irreparably damaged his reputation among peers, even if fans largely stayed loyal. Despite this frightening incident, Tubb continued to perform and record for another 2 decades. He was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 1965, just 8 years after nearly gunning down an innocent man. While he avoided further scandal, the 1957 shooting remains one of the most bizarre and disturbing episodes in country music lore. Tubb died in 1984 at the age of 70. His contributions to music remain intact, but the gunfire he unleashed in a moment of rage forever complicates his legacy. For all the heartache he put into songs, it's what nearly happened in that Nashville lobby that earns Ernest Tubb a place among the genre's darkest chapters. Faron Young. Faron Young charmed America with his boyish grin and smooth tenor voice, earning nicknames like the Young Sheriff and Hillbilly Heartthrob during the 1950s. With hits like Hello Walls and Live Fast Love Hard Die Young, he embodied the rebellious romanticism that defined early country stardom. But behind the crooner image was a man whose behavior, especially toward women, marred his career and reputation. Born in 1932 in Shreveport, Louisiana, Young was a regular on the Louisiana Hayride and Grand Ole Opry stages. But by the early 1970s, his offstage conduct began overshadowing his musical success. In 1972, during a concert in Clarksburg, West Virginia, Young was accused of spanking a female audience member on stage after she allegedly spat on him. He was fined a mere $24 for the assault, but the optics were brutal, a fading star humiliating a woman in public for a moment of ego. Young was also known for his excessive drinking, abrasive temperament, and public feuds with fellow musicians. As newer, more progressive voices began reshaping country music in the late 70s and 80s, Young grew openly bitter, accusing the industry of abandoning traditional values, when in reality it had mostly abandoned him. By the 1990s, his alcoholism and isolation had deepened. Tragically, in December 1996, Faron Young shot himself in the head at age 64 and died the next day. He had reportedly been depressed over health issues and felt forgotten by the industry he once ruled. Young's legacy is complicated, a major contributor to the golden era of country, but also a man whose temper, misogyny, and decline became cautionary tales. His voice may have melted hearts, but his behavior too often revealed a cold, combative side that tarnished everything he built. Tammy Wynette. Tammy Wynette. The First Lady of country music is best known for her iconic ballad, "Stand By Your Man." But behind the tragic vibrato and broken-hearted lyrics was a woman enmeshed in a life of secrets, questionable choices, and what many now believe was a deeply toxic relationship shrouded in deceit. Born Virginia Wynette Pugh in 1942, she became a country legend with a voice that trembled with vulnerability. Her life, though, mirrored the drama in her songs, especially during her marriage to her fifth husband, George Ritchie. In October 1978, Wynette told police she had been kidnapped at knife point in a Nashville parking lot and beaten by a masked assailant. She suffered a broken cheekbone and severe facial bruises. Oddly, the attacker stole nothing, not her cash, credit cards, or car. The incident baffled police and no suspect was ever found. The story remained suspiciously unresolved for decades, until in 2000, Wynette's daughter, Jackie Daly, published a memoir claiming the entire kidnapping was fabricated to cover up a violent beating by George Ritchie. According to Daly, the fake abduction was part of a pattern of abuse and control claims supported by other insiders who observed Ritchie's behavior over the years. Wynette never publicly admitted to the cover-up, and she remained married to Ritchie until her death in 1998. She passed away under questionable circumstances involving pain medication, leading to further speculation about what truly happened behind closed doors. Though she inspired millions and broke barriers for women in country music, Wynette's decision to stand by a man who allegedly hurt her and potentially deceived the public in the process casts a long, dark shadow. Her legacy is one of resilience, yes, but also one of silence in the face of suffering. A queen, but one whose crown was far heavier than most ever knew. Buck Owens. Buck Owens is remembered as the architect of the Bakersfield sound and a co-host of the beloved country variety show, Hee Haw. With crisp guitar riffs and twangy vocals, Owens injected fresh energy into the genre during the 1960s, earning 21 #1 hits along the way. But the smile he wore on stage often masked a cutthroat businessman who prioritized profit over people and left a trail of bitterness behind him. Born in Texas in 1929, Owens became a country powerhouse, but his handling of money and relationships was far from admirable. One of the most infamous incidents involved his young protege, Merle Haggard. Haggard's early song, "Sing Me Back Home," was published under Owens's company, yet Haggard later claimed he received barely a dime from it. Owens was accused of routinely taking advantage of up-and-coming artists, keeping the lion's share of publishing rights and royalties, while offering little in return. Beyond business, Owens had a reputation for dominating the spotlight. During joint tours with stars like George Jones, Buck allegedly arranged lineups, so he always closed the show even when billed as co-headliner. Former bandmates and colleagues also accused him of being cold, domineering, and emotionally unavailable. Perhaps most unsettling were the quiet allegations that Owens used his influence to pressure women in the industry into unwanted intimacy. While no charges were ever filed, these claims circulated in Nashville for years, creating an unspoken cloud over his otherwise clean public image. Owens passed away in 2006, still revered for his musical innovations. But behind every honky-tonk anthem and comedic sketch was a man whose controlling nature and backroom dealings left a bitter taste for many. He may have revolutionized country's sound, but his legacy as a behind-the-scenes bully is just as enduring. Roy Acuff. Roy Acuff was long hailed as the king of country music, a pioneer whose influence shaped the Grand Ole Opry and the traditionalist core of Nashville's identity. Born in 1903 in Tennessee, Acuff's voice and fiddle playing brought rural Americana into the mainstream. But while he projected a clean-cut, God-fearing image, his legacy is complicated by whispers of power abuse and gatekeeping that quietly strangled countless careers. At the Grand Ole Opry, where Acuff reigned for decades, he was more than a performer, he was a political force. Many insiders allege that Acuff leveraged his status to determine who advanced and who was blackballed. If you crossed him, or even simply veered from his traditionalist views, you risked losing stage-time industry support or your entire shot at stardom. Stories emerged of Acuff blocking performers he found too progressive, too outspoken, or simply too different. His clashes with Hank Williams, one of country's most innovative voices, were particularly well known. Acuff reportedly criticized Williams' phrasing and style, even trying to limit his exposure at the Opry. Others claimed Acuff quietly lobbied to remove artists he considered unworthy, regardless of talent. He was also known for his legendary temper. Former bandmates and Opry staff described him as volatile, capable of warm generosity one day and searing outbursts the next. While he never faced legal scandal, the emotional toll he left on those around him was lasting. Roy Acuff died in 1992 at age 89, celebrated as a national treasure. But beneath the legend lies a troubling truth that his rigid grip on tradition may have cost country music some of its most promising voices. Revered on stage but feared backstage, Acuff's reign is a stark reminder of how power unchecked can quietly poison even the most respected thrones. Johnny Horton. Johnny Horton captivated audiences with his booming voice and love for historical ballads. Known for hits like The Battle of New Orleans and North to Alaska, he stood at the crossroads of country and folk storytelling, making American history feel like a Saturday night barn dance. But behind the patriotic anthems and theatrical charm was a man whose need for legend, both in life and death, blurred the line between fact and self-created fiction. Born in 1925 in Los Angeles, but raised in East Texas, Horton was married to Billie Jean Williams, the widow of Hank Williams. That connection elevated his status in country circles, but so did his elaborate persona. Horton often claimed he had psychic visions, especially one in which he foresaw his own death. He repeatedly told friends and family that a drunk driver would be the end of him. In 1960, that eerie prediction came true. After finishing a show at the Skyline Club in Austin, the same venue where Hank Williams had performed before his death, Horton was killed in a car crash near Milano, Texas. His car was struck head-on by a drunk driver. The accident cemented his tragic narrative, but some close to him questioned whether Horton had fueled his own demise through obsession and reckless myth-making. While he wasn't a criminal, many insiders saw Horton as a master manipulator of image. He leaned heavily into the honky-tonk persona offstage, despite being relatively soft-spoken in private. Some believed he exaggerated or outright fabricated elements of his past to seem more rugged and authentic. Though his music remains beloved, Johnny Horton's legacy is entwined with a man who may have written not just his songs, but his own fatal folklore. In the end, his greatest performance may have been the one he staged for the world outside the studio. Webb Pierce. Webb Pierce was one of country music's biggest stars during the 1950s and early 60s, known for chart toppers like There Stands the Glass and In the Jailhouse Now. His nasal voice and steel guitar-heavy recordings helped define the honky-tonk era, but Pierce's behind-the-scenes behavior earned him just as much notoriety, and not in a good way. Born in 1921 in Louisiana, Pierce was flamboyant to the core. He drove cars adorned with silver dollars, wore rhinestones as casual attire, and built a swimming pool in the shape of a giant guitar. While these things might have seemed eccentric, they symbolized a deeper problem: Pierce's unapologetic ego and his disregard for fairness. Musicians who toured with him frequently accused him of paying unfairly low wages, even as he flaunted his wealth. Session players and bandmates spoke of long tours with minimal compensation, while Pierce lived large on their backs. He was seen as stingy, domineering, and quick to dismiss anyone who challenged his authority. His competitive streak was also legendary. He allegedly went out of his way to push younger artists out of spotlight slots on tours and festivals, ensuring his name stayed at the top, regardless of whether he deserved it. Newcomers viewed him not as a mentor, but as a gatekeeper with a mean streak. His drinking didn't help matters. Several bar fights, heated arguments, and incidents involving belligerent behavior painted him as someone who couldn't handle fame without slipping into arrogance or aggression. Though he was inducted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2001, long after his prime, Webb Pierce left a legacy marked as much by ego as by talent. He didn't just enjoy the spotlight, he hogged it, and in doing so dimmed opportunities for others who deserved their moment to shine. Waylon Jennings. Waylon Jennings helped pioneer the outlaw country movement, rebelling against Nashville's cookie-cutter sound and creating a grittier, more personal style. With a deep baritone and rugged appeal, Jennings gave the world unforgettable tracks like Luckenbach, Texas, and Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys. But while his music was rebellious, his personal behavior often crossed the line from nonconformist to toxic. Born in 1937 in Littlefield, Texas, Jennings had close ties to Buddy Holly and nearly died in the infamous 1959 plane crash that killed Holly Ritchie Valens and the Big Bopper. Though fate spared him, it didn't tame him. By the 1970s, Jennings was deep into cocaine addiction, blowing through up to $1,500 a day and often alienating those closest to him. In 1977, Jennings was arrested on federal drug charges for possession of cocaine with intent to distribute. Though the case was eventually dismissed due to procedural errors, the damage was done. His addiction led to missed shows, abusive outbursts, and neglect of both his band, the Wailers, and his children. Members of his crew claimed he withheld earnings, made erratic decisions, and forced them to endure chaos for the sake of his image. Jennings proudly flaunted his anti-establishment stance, but some saw it as a cover for irresponsibility and selfishness. While his music challenged tradition, his actions betrayed trust. He lived fast, left wreckage behind, and spent years digging himself out of the hole he created. Though Jennings later got sober and died in 2002 at age 64, with his legacy largely intact, those who suffered in his wake professionally and personally never got the same redemption arc. The outlaw may have redefined country music, but he also left scars that no melody could ever erase. Jimmy Wakely. Jimmy Wakely was once the epitome of the clean-cut singing cowboy. With his polished voice and matinee idol looks, Wakely starred in dozens of Western films and recorded gentle hits like One Has My Name, The Other Has My Heart. But while audiences saw a gentleman in a 10-gallon hat, insiders painted a different picture, one of deception, exploitation, and quiet manipulation. Born in 1914 in Arkansas, Wakely emerged during the golden age of country western cinema, often portrayed as a morally upright hero. Off-screen, however, he was far more calculating. Those who worked alongside him in films and music complained that he was a ruthless businessman who hoarded profits and underpaid collaborators. Crew members and fellow performers from his westerns accused him of signing unfair contracts and pocketing more than his share from distribution deals. What stung even more was his carefully curated cowboy image. While he sold himself as an authentic Rough Rider from the American heartland, Wakely's real-life experience with ranching and the frontier lifestyle was minimal at best. He reportedly exaggerated and in some cases fabricated biographical details to align himself with the Wild West mythology so popular with audiences at the time. Though no criminal charges were ever brought against him, Wakely left behind a trail of broken professional relationships. Some actors he worked with alleged that he pushed for billing dominance in group features and used his influence to stifle competitors' roles. He continued to perform and record until his death in 1982, and today is largely remembered through nostalgia-tinted lenses. But for those who knew the truth, Jimmy Wakely wasn't the wholesome cowboy he played. He was a polished opportunist who let perception overshadow honesty, and in doing so, rode into country music's history with a mask far more crafted than his melodies. Porter Wagoner. Porter Wagoner dazzled audiences with rhinestone suits, tall hair, and traditional country charm. Known for hosting the Porter Wagoner Show and for launching Dolly Parton's early career, he became a staple of the Grand Ole Opry and a celebrated figure in Nashville. But behind the rhinestones and showbiz smiles was a man whose need for control left behind wounds that fame couldn't heal. Born in 1927 in Missouri, Wagoner welcomed Parton onto his show in 1967, promising to mentor her. But their partnership soon soured. Parton's rise to fame meant outgrowing the show, and Porter didn't take it well. When she tried to leave in 1974 to launch her solo career, Wagoner sued her for breach of contract, demanding $3 million. He claimed he had created her and deserved compensation. The legal battle ended in a settlement, but the emotional toll lingered for years. Beyond Parton, band members and show staff described Wagoner as rigid, volatile, and at times vindictive. Musicians were allegedly dismissed without warning for minor disagreements, and many described working under him as creatively stifling. His demand for absolute loyalty clashed with the very spirit of country music's freewheeling soul. Wagoner also struggled with alcohol, which reportedly worsened his temperament. His need to micromanage not just music but people's careers stained his image, with many who saw his mentorship as a leash, not a lifeline. He died in 2007 at the age of 80 with tributes from across the industry. But for those who remember the lawsuits, the backstage tensions, and the way he weaponized power against those who trusted him, Porter Wagoner's story serves as a reminder sometimes the biggest stars cast the darkest shadows. Jim Reeves. Jim Reeves built his image on elegance. Known as Gentleman Jim, he revolutionized country music in the 1950s with a smooth, crooning style that softened honky-tonk grit into Nashville sophistication. With classics like He'll Have to Go and Welcome to My World, Reeves became a crossover icon. But while his voice conveyed grace, the whispers behind the scenes painted a more troubling picture. Born in 1923 in Texas, Reeves was a former minor league baseball player turned country sensation. As his fame rose, so did rumors, ones that were never publicly confirmed but widely circulated within Nashville's tight-knit music community. Industry insiders alleged that Reeves carried on multiple extramarital affairs, some with aspiring young singers, allegedly using his influence to promise career opportunities in exchange for personal favors. Though no formal complaints or lawsuits were ever filed, the gossip was persistent enough to rattle his polished persona. Reeves also developed a reputation for being controlling in the studio, frequently clashing with producers over sound arrangements and personnel. Some labeled him a perfectionist. Others called it ego. After his tragic death in a plane crash in 1964 at the age of 40, these stories didn't go away. In fact, they multiplied. With no fear of retaliation, former colleagues began speaking more openly about the contradictions between Reeves's public image and private actions. While his widow fiercely protected his legacy, the gap between Gentleman Jim and the man behind the mic became harder to ignore. Jim Reeves's place in country music history is undisputed, but the legend often obscures a man whose charm may have been as carefully produced as his records. In an industry built on authenticity, Reeves's legacy poses a difficult question. How do we reconcile beauty in sound with silence around misconduct? Some of these legends were praised as icons, others worshipped as trailblazers. But now that the truth is out, can we still separate the artist from their actions, from murder and manipulation to betrayal and unchecked egos? These aren't just shocking footnotes, they're the stories behind the stars. So what do you think? Should their music still be celebrated, or has their legacy been rightfully stained? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us for more deep dives into Hollywood's hidden history, only here on Uncovered Tinseltown Uncovered.